Hey, what's up guys? Tony here, and you're probably looking at the title going, Armistice Day. What the heck is Armistice Day? Because today's Veterans Day. Today's the 11th of November. As I'm recording this, I'll probably post it maybe tomorrow. So the 12th. But you're looking at the title going, what is Armistice Day? Or maybe you've heard of it, and if you're a European, you probably already know what it is. But if you're an American, maybe you don't understand what it is. And what I figured I'd do is do a commentary about Armistice Day, just very briefly, but I'll do a Veterans Day commentary for us Americans. I want to talk about a very special veteran that I actually know and lives right down the road from me. So basically, Armistice Day, if you don't know, it is the day that World War I ended. It ended on November 11th, 1918 at the 11th minute of the 11th hour. So basically 11:11 in the morning. So it was 11:11 1918 at 11:11 in the morning. Is that confusing enough for you? And so that day became known as Armistice Day. It's the ceasefire day. It's the day the guns went silent in Europe and World War I ended. And then somewhere down the line, and I don't know, and I guess I probably should have looked it up before starting this commentary. I notice I say it a lot sometimes, but somewhere down the line, Armistice Day in the United States turned into Veterans Day. It's a day that we recognize and honor our veterans of all wars, current veterans, past veterans, and it's a day for them. And it's not just a day where people have the day off from work and school, and federal employees get the day off, stuff like that. It's not only that. It's a day where ideally you should go and thank a veteran for their service. That would be the most ideal situation. It's what I do. I have had, well, as of this moment right now, I have not. I mean, the only person I've really thanked is my good friend Tom, and you guys might know Make Believe XP. He's in the Navy, and of course, my father and my two brothers were in the service. So I've got a handful of people that I feel privileged to be able to know these people who have it with themselves to give of the country, give for the country, give their time. My father was a Marine for 20 years. His first career was in the United States Marine Corps. So for you guys who, if I maybe haven't done it personally, thank you very much. If you're in the service now, or you were in the service, thank you very much. Thank you for your service. There's the whole 1% thing going on right now. I honestly really feel that those who have served or are going to serve, which is really cool, going on that whole who's going to serve. The radio, at least in San Diego, there's a radio station, Rock 105. They keep broadcasting names of people who are going into basic training. And recently they broadcast this guy's name. It's on this repetitive commercial for like Navy Federal Credit Union or something like that. I don't remember exactly what it's for, but this local kid from San Diego enlisted in the Marine Corps, and he's going off to boot camp here, I guess, in the next, I don't know, few months or so. And so they recognize that, and I think that's pretty awesome. So anyways, for those of you guys who have either been in the service or are in the service now, thank you for what you guys do. You guys really are part of an elite group of people who you represent the best of the country, and you represent and protect guys like myself who might not necessarily have the courage or the desire to do that. It really takes a special person, so thank you guys very much. So now that I've got all sappy and stuff, let me go ahead and find my pen that's on the ground, and I want to talk about a particular veteran, like I said, that has been a big part of my life for the last 3 years. His name is Dick Field. He's a veteran of World War II. He's still alive. He's still with us. And we were supposed to do a breakfast with World War II veterans and Jeeps and reenactors and the whole shebang yet tomorrow. But the rain and stuff is causing us to have to cancel that event. So we'll have to do that later. I plan on vlogging that and putting that on my other channel, and maybe I'll put some of it on this channel. But anyways, I want to talk about Dick. He is a part of a... I'll call him elite. I don't like to get into the whole elite versus not elite, military servicemen. But he was a paratrooper in World War II. He was a part of a unit called the 551st PIB, the Parachute Infantry Battalion, and his unit was a separate battalion. It wasn't attached to a division, like you've heard of the 101st Airborne or the 82nd Airborne. His was a separate battalion, although he was attached a lot to the 82nd Airborne, and eventually it was rolled up into the 82nd Airborne after the Battle of the Bulge. but throughout the most part of the war, it was its separate own battalion. Now his battalion was known as the Goya Battalion. Every battalion had their own like slogan, you know, like the really famous, the 506 of the 101st Airborne. They were Currahee because of the mountain. Every single unit has their own slogan, you know, like the 82nd Airborne, the All-Americans, and within them they've got different regiments that have their own slogans. So they were the Goya, which stands for "Get Off Your Ass." And it was, a legend goes, is that it was something that the battalion commander would say, "Get off your ass," and it turned into the Goya division, or excuse me, the Goya battalion. And they were put together, they were trained as paratroopers, and they were put together as a unit for the planned invasion of Martinique, which was a French island. It is, I should say, it's not the Gone. It's a French island. It's a French island in the Caribbean. Wow, I had a hard time getting that out. Anyways, the plan was to invade Martinique, and so those guys were being trained in Panama to invade Martinique, and that eventually did not happen. They were transferred to the States, back to the States from Panama for the planned invasion of Europe, which we all know now is Operation Overlord, or D-Day is what's commonly known as. And his unit was a part of something that it's a tragic accident, because you don't really hear about the training accidents that happened, but the U.S. Army they were looking on ways to deploy more paratroopers, because if you had the C-47s, they were stacked with, I believe, 24 guys, 12 guys on each side, and they would jump out of the aircraft, you know, in sticks of 2 out of one side of the aircraft. Anyway, so what they wanted to do, and you guys have all probably seen the gliders, you know, from like Band of Brothers or whatever. Those held another, I think, 12 to 20 guys. I don't know the exact number off the top of my head. And they also held equipment like Jeeps and stuff like that. Anyways, what they wanted to do is they want to put paratroopers into these gliders and have them jump out of the gliders. So one C-47 would tow 2 gliders, and those 2 gliders would be full of men, and they'd all jump out. And it was just another way of deploying more troops in a concentrated area. So what they were doing is they were training, pretty much like practice, I guess. But I mean, you know, they had tried it before, and so they were doing a nighttime jump at a camp in North Carolina, Camp McCall. And what happened is the conditions were light rain and mist. And if you've seen Band of Brothers, you know that green light, the go light, you know, jump out of the aircraft. Well, they got the green light to jump. Well, unfortunately though, a bunch of men jumped out, and they parachuted into a reservoir. The reservoir south is what it's called, and 8 guys drowned. You know, they're laden with equipment, and I believe they said the deepest one guy actually fell into was 7 feet of water, and he somehow survived by constantly fighting to swim up, catch a breath, go down, try to unhook his equipment, come back up to the surface, fighting the whole way. And that guy survived, but still a lot of guys died in what would be waist deep water. You know, if you're carrying, you know, 200 pounds of equipment, you know, waist deep water, if you're on your back, is going to be fatal if you can't get up. So it's an unfortunate accident, and he told me all about that, and it was really interesting to, you know, to see him, you know, talking about it. And so from there, he was a part of the invasion of South France. So we all know of Operation Overlord in the north part of France, in the Normandy area. He invaded from the Mediterranean side with his unit, and they fought what was known as the breakout, Patton's breakout. You know, he just charged across France, pushing the Germans with his, you know, his armored division, and his unit in the south was a part of that. And then he got into the Battle of the Bulge, which a lot of units were rushed into the Bulge, and his unit was no exception. He, like I said, his unit was attached with the 82nd Airborne a lot. And when he got there, and he mentioned this, and this is what really sticks with me about this story, is that he had a Native American friend who was in his unit, and they were very, very close. And so they got into some fighting, and I think it was like a mortar shell went off, and it hurt his friend, the Native American guy, really badly. And so he picked him up, he took him back to the aid station, which like was in a house. It was pretty much just like a house off the main line, the MLR, you know, the main line of resistance. And you have to remember, the Battle of the Bulge was one of the situations where the Allies were encircled by the Germans, and eventually, you know, the Allies pushed through and break out. But at this point, it was a bleak time. You know, it was the last gasp of the German army. And so he takes his friend back. They take him to work on him as quickly as they can, and he says there was a fire, and he sits down by the fire and he wants to dry his socks out, his boots out, and dry his feet out. So he takes his boots off, and a medic or a doctor happens to come by and takes a look at his feet, and he gets pulled off the line for frostbite. He had trench foot. So he gets pulled off the line, and then he's evac'd back to a hospital back in England and stuff. And he never found out what happened to his friend. He didn't know if he lived, he didn't know if he died, and it wasn't until there was a reunion years later that he found out that his friend did in fact live. However, by the time that he got to the reunion, the guy had already passed away. So it was one of those situations where, you know, he was actually really upset about that when I interviewed him. And so that's just, I figured I'd pass this story along to you guys, especially on a Veterans Day like today. They're touching stories, and this is exactly why I love history, because of this individual personal story. You know, we don't, when people look at history and they look at it from, say, high school level, where you talk about leaders and battles and stuff, our country is not composed of the leader. Should not be identified by the leader that runs the country. You know, we all, as a group of people, make up this country, and we all have different stories, and I feel that all of our stories are worth telling. And this is one gentleman who I think he's got a fantastic story. It's not quite in depth because it's only a 10-minute video or so you can't really get into depth about it. But the point of the story is, well, I should say the point of the commentary is just like I said earlier. You know, today is Veterans Day. You know, you should thank a veteran for their service, and just recognize and just sort of retell the stories of those people who have served. You know, it's a long-standing tradition in human history to retell. I don't want to call them war stories, because it's not necessarily a war story, but it's a story about an individual and his achievements or his time during the service. So, anyways, guys, if you can thank a veteran, put it out on Twitter. You know, it's just something that I feel that is personally I feel it's important. So anyways, guys, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the commentary. Thanks for subscribing, and I'll talk to you later.